Hello and welcome back to Guides.Global. My name is John Howell and I'm the Editorial Director, and with me today is Gerry O'Brien. Gerry has retired to the south of Spain. Gerry, welcome and thank you for doing this interview.
Thank you very much.
So let's find out a little bit about you before we do anything else. You are Irish.
Irish.
And whereabouts in Ireland do you hail from?
I was born in Tipperary in the middle of Ireland quite a number of years ago, and then moved to Dublin to do my teacher training and spent all my teaching career working in a school in Dublin.
And I understand that you retired a few years ago as the headmaster of a secondary school.
A primary school.
Primary school.
The school I started teaching in 1978, I was a classroom teacher, and then 17 years later I became principal of the school and had a further 17 years as principal, or headmaster as they call it in some countries, and then took early retirement and came out here 3.5 years ago, July 2012.
I think after 34 years teaching in a primary school, you deserved it.
No, thank you for saying it. I felt I had served long enough, made the children suffer for long enough.
So you've been living here for 3.5 years. Did you come on your own with a family?
Yeah, I had bought the apartment here in 2004 and had come over 3 or 4 times a year. So my intention was to reverse that process when I retired and go back to Ireland 3 or 4 times a year and live here. So I'm a single man. I was never married or divorced or anything exciting like that. I came alone, but I had already made contacts out here before I came, so it wasn't a completely new experience.
And so you knew the place well, really, because
Very
you've
well.
been coming here year after year.
And many of my friends had come over with me, and we had made social contacts in the area.
And whereabouts do you actually live? It's within Marbella itself, but whereabouts?
In the town of Marbella, just halfway between the Paseo, the promenade, and the main street, in the centre of town, not in the old town, but in the newer section of town, so right in the heart of the town.
So you're within walking distance of everywhere?
Everywhere.
Which is a huge advantage, isn't it?
Oh, especially with traffic in the high season along the Costa. Traffic and travelling anywhere becomes a nightmare, and parking becomes very difficult. So it is a great advantage to live centrally and to have your own parking space if you do have a car, and use it as little as possible.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And of course, parking in Marbella is a nightmare at the best of times, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It's always driving around and looking, and that's why apartments that have their own designated parking space will be quite in demand. And if you wanted to buy a parking space in Marbella, I think the going rate is around 30,000 euros.
Yes. And if you've tried to park a few times, you will appreciate just how much good value that is.
Absolutely. Now, there are, for example, my apartment doesn't have any off-street parking as such, so I rent a parking space in a nearby underground complex, and that is around 70 euros a month, which is very good value for secure parking.
Yes.
And it's possible to negotiate if this is right in the heart of Marbella. If I were looking to rent a parking space on the outskirts, it would be cheaper again.
Of course, but you'd then have to walk 15 minutes or whatever to get to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do you speak Spanish?
I, how shall I say it? I can express myself in Spanish. I find it quite difficult to understand local people. It seems like most countries, the south of the country, I hope I'm not insulting any nationality, the south of Ireland, certainly the diction people speak with very strong accents. South of England, I think, is similar, and the south of Spain. So people say, for example, Castilian Spanish, the pure high Spanish, is best learnt in the north of Spain or around Madrid. The more southerly you go, the more difficult it is, the more guttural they're lovely people, by the way. I don't mean anything negative by it, but understanding what people are saying who are speaking naturally is very difficult. So I've done classes and lessons, and I've had individual tuition, but it is one of the benefits of living in Marbella is you're never far from somebody who speaks your own language. One of the negatives is the same, that if you want to immerse yourself in the Spanish language, Marbella is not the easiest place from that point of view.
Because everyone's trying to speak English.
Yes. And very often you'll say something in Spanish, "Cuánto cuesta por favor?" What is the price? And somebody will say, "375, please," because their English.
Don't you find this extraordinary when you end up having these conversations where you, speaking English, are talking to them in Spanish and they're replying to you in English? It's slightly surreal.
Yeah, it is. And they think they're being helpful, which for most holiday makers they are.
Yes.
Because those holiday makers just want to communicate. Yes. But if you live here, you actually appreciate getting the opportunity to practice. And if they just slowed down their speech and spoke with you, it would be a great help to you. But they don't mean anything disrespectful by responding in your language.
And I know when I was learning Spanish 30 years ago, I learned in this part of the country as well, and it is a very different accent. You can, of course, understand mainline Castilian Spanish, but they swallow half the ends of sentences, and the accent is very strong. So you have to get used to it.
And they abbreviate a lot of things. Buenas, for example, people say buena, meaning buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenas. So you have to become accustomed to their abbreviations and that.
And it's important to remember, isn't it, that you've mentioned that here in Marbella, you will never be very far from someone who speaks English, but you only need to go 10, 15 kilometers out into the countryside, and the English speakers will be few and far between.
And similarly, even within the town of Marbella, it's quite diverse. You have the Paseo that is very tourist orientated.
Yes.
You have the old town, the Casco Antigua, that is very traditional, but yet very tourist orientated. The areas where Spanish themselves live and people who work in the tourist industry is quite Spanish. So you only have to go a little bit off the main street and you're in a cafe where it's all tapas, all Spanish, and nobody really will respond to you in English.
So Spanish is then a very useful skill when you're living here.
Absolutely. But for me, it's on principle also. Yes. Like when there was mass emigration or immigration to Ireland and I was in teaching, I always encouraged parents, when we had 20 nationalities in our school, and I would always tell them, there's free language classes in English in the local library or whatever, because I understood that if they're from Poland or Lithuania or Latvia or wherever, part of their integration with the country, because their children were becoming very integrated, learned like sponges, they were picking up the English, and then mum and dad, they were having to translate for mum and dad.
That's right.
So the sooner they got a working knowledge of the language, the better their ability to integrate with the parents of the Irish children. And it's the same living here. If you want to show respect for the country you've chosen to live in, then on principle, even if you didn't absolutely need it, on principle, I feel you should show respect by learning their language.
And of course, it's a gateway to the culture.
Absolutely.
You can never really become integrated into Spain unless you speak Spanish.
Absolutely. And particularly if you want to, because living in a tourist area, there is the danger that it's completely expat and completely geared for the tourists. But once you go literally outside the town, then you get to experience what is still very traditional. And you only have to go 5 or 10 minutes on any of the roads outside Marbella, and you're in a country cafe where everybody is traditional.
And I think it's important for those who don't know southern Spain, Costa del Sol is the most developed part of the coast of Spain. But even here, this is not wall-to-wall development. You go 2-3 kilometers inland and you're back in Spain. This is not the sort of international hinterland that you find down here.
But funny, one of the things I discovered recently, I play this sport called paddle tennis, which was invented in Spain and Spanish-speaking countries, and is immensely popular in Spain, more popular than tennis itself. And all the Spanish play it. And like the club I play in, which is a tennis and paddle club, has 4 tennis courts and 11 paddle clubs.
Really?
But when I had a car breakdown recently on the main road, I had my repair kit out, and the police came to check that everything was okay. And they were very formal and very kind of standoffish while making sure everything was okay, until one of them spotted my paddle gear on the back seat and said to me in Spanish, "Do you play paddle, and where?" Suddenly they were both over helping, and somebody explained to me that if you are seen to play paddle, they realize you're attempting to integrate. You're likely somebody who mixes with Spanish people. So you're not just using the country to come and play golf or whatever. You're a genuine person trying to integrate.
And it is extraordinary, isn't it? The difference in attitude. You get stopped by the police, and of course that happens much more in Spain than it does in England and Ireland. It's a very normal part of life to be part of a police control.
And so the same person who told me that said his brother actually carries a paddle racket to keep it in the back of the car. He doesn't play paddle, just in case. And the expression he used was, by the way, if they had seen golf clubs in the back, they would have spat on the side of the road, as in their image of people, you know, the typical who fly in, play their golf and go and don't mix with Spanish and that. So maybe
and of course
keep
they
the
might
clubs.
even have found a reason to fine you for something.
Well, he didn't say that, but certainly in terms of the friendliness, as distinct from just, but there wasn't anything bad about their attitude initially, but they were professional but dispassionate.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden they were showing me the different nuts. I had never changed a wheel on this particular car, and suddenly their sleeves were rolled up and they were helping. Well, and they wished me luck in the tournament I was going to play
That's
in.
a great story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And very, very
and
informative.
it's a true story, as in personal experience.
So, turning to the lifestyle here, we've touched on it already. What do you do when you're here? You're now retired, but how do you spend the day?
I'm probably a little unusual in that I'm a sports nut. So I start my day with a run. I go for a run every morning. I come on the Paseo to Port Banús and back, about 10 kilometers. And then I come back and I have a light breakfast with, you know, light breakfast, fruit and cereal and that. And then I go playing paddle 5 days a week.
Oh, right.
For 2 hours.
So this is why you look so slender and fit.
Well, I make the effort. I enjoy exercise. And when I was working, I was lucky if I could get a game of tennis or a trip to the gym, sneaking in an hour here and there. It is the best of worlds and it is the worst of worlds in terms of temptation. And Oscar Wilde said it, he could resist everything except temptation. Out here, it is a constant temptation, particularly if you're retired. Because if you do have a lot of discretionary time, and there are 300 days of sunshine a year, and the temperature, even we're now in the middle of winter in January, and you could have the top in your car down, you need sunglasses and sun hat. So the temptation to sit outdoors, to stay on. Also, one of the things in growing up and living in Ireland, when it came to closing time, you were thrown out. Here, when it comes to that time, you're locked in.
Yes.
And they lock the doors, and then it's an informal situation, and you're walking home with the birds chirping.
I was going to say, when we're talking closing time here, we're talking 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
2 o'clock. 2 o'clock is when they must clear the terrace, which just means they remove your drink inside, and everybody moves in, because a lot of people are on holiday, a lot of people are retired. So what rush is on you? You're retired, and before you know it, you, who normally had 2 drinks a night and went home because you were getting up for work the following morning, are now having double or treble that on a semi-regular basis. You never intended it, and because you're socializing with people and you're very relaxed, it is a real danger. And for me, it became something I was so conscious of, I actually gave up drinking in Spain.
Oh, right.
So now I'm teetotal in Spain, but I drink as normal.
It's a lush when you're back in Ireland. I think, I remember one of my friends said to me one time that the 2 great challenges in Spain are staying sober and staying married. I think the 2 perhaps going
I can certainly comment on one of those anyway.
Yes.
If you need a lot of self-control because of the climate and the lifestyle.
Yes.
And I discovered that I could drink what we call sinless beer, 0.0 beer without alcohol. And I can sit in the pub and people think you have a drink in front of you, and you're sipping away your drink. And on a special occasion, I will have a drink, but normally I don't, which also gives you the freedom to use your car. So you can go up to beautiful places like Benavice, which in Ireland we have a place called Kinsale that has gourmet restaurants, and the version of it around here is Benavice that has, I think, nearly 30 restaurants.
Fine restaurants up there.
Fine. And if you have a car and you don't drink
10-15 kilometers, it's not hard to get to, but
30,
if you go
40 minutes.
Yeah, and but you have a few beers, then you have all sorts of worry associated.
So it gives a freedom, and you become quite popular with people who like to have a designated
Correct, absolutely.
driver.
I'm putting you on my list already.
Exactly.
And I think people who've seen any of our other interviews will realise you're probably not a common example of someone who's living in not only Spain but Southern Europe in that lifestyle.
I recognise the danger very early on. I happen to be somebody who enjoys the outdoor life and the exercise and that sort of thing. So after I finished paddle tennis each day, I had a Spanish tutor, God bless him. His reward in paradise is guaranteed, because he has been attempting to give me one-to-one an hour 3 times a week. And he would give me homework. And so during the afternoon, both I and my Spanish techs would work on our tan on the balcony, because sometimes I'd nod off when I'm supposed to be doing my homework. But I make the effort during that time, if I'm not on the beach, which for 7 months of the year is quite a possibility. And that kind of takes you to late afternoon. I'd normally go for a walk before dinner, and then I would have my dinner and then socialise with people in the pub or wherever.
So really, combination of the wonderful climate down here and a healthy lifestyle, you should live to about 120.
Well, that's the idea. I'm hoping not to spend too much money on medical costs anyway, even though I did join the private health insurance out here, which I don't know whether any of your listeners or viewers would be aware is a fraction of the cost. The quality of private health, I'm told, is as good as any part of Northern Europe. But when I was in Ireland paying a private health, I was paying over 1,100 euros a year. I now pay for exactly the same service, 55 a month. So that's a third almost. And even, I think it's a fraction of the cost. And it's age related, and I'm just 60. When I get to 70, it still will be a third cheaper than what I was paying as a 55-year-old in Ireland.
I'll come back to the healthcare service in a minute.